It's 2 a.m. in October 1907, New York City. A cold winter breeze is blowing, but thousands of people are standing outside the city's largest banks. Fear is etched on their faces, passbooks in their hands. These are people whose entire life savings are deposited in the banks, and today a rumor has spread through the city that the banks are about to collapse. So they all have one thing on their minds: withdraw their money as soon as morning arrives, before it's all over. The cashiers and employees inside the bank have received a very secret and strict order from above. The order is, when the gates open in the morning and people come asking for their money, you must count the notes very slowly. Music, take your time. Double-check signatures. If it takes 5 minutes to pay one person, you must take 20. Why? Because the government knows that if they all withdraw their money at once, America will be bankrupt by this evening. The country will collapse. No government, no police, no system can save them. That very night, a phone call comes from Washington, D.C. The caller is none other than Theodore Roosevelt, the President of the United States. The same Roosevelt who music spent his entire political career destroying one man. The man whose companies he had dismantled. The man he always abused. Today, that same Roosevelt is calling that man and telling him, the country is about to collapse. The system has failed. Only you can save us now. And that man is a 70-year-old man with a terrible cold, coughing, and a red and swollen nose from some strange illness. He is sitting comfortably in his magnificent private library, playing cards, music. He hangs up and drops a card on the table. There is no surprise on his face. He knew this call would come. He never had any doubt. That man's name was J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan once said, "A person always does anything for 2 reasons. One reason that sounds good music and one reason that is real." This video isn't just the life story of a rich man. It's the story of power that's invisible to the naked eye music. This is the story of J.P. Morgan, and the truth will shake you to your core. But before I get into this story, I have something music. Have you ever wondered why Edison invented the light bulb, Tesla invented the current, Carnegie built a steel empire, Ford invented the car? What did J.P. Morgan create? Nothing. He didn't even invent a needle in his life. He didn't build a factory. He didn't invent anything new. Yet, he was the most powerful of them all. He bought the world's greatest inventors. Presidents would call him at night. He saved America from collapse twice and held an entire economy in his grasp. So the question is, and this question isn't just about Morgan. It's about all of us. Can someone, without creating anything, without inventing anything, simply by understanding the true rules of this world, rise above those who create? And if so, what are those rules? Morgan's life is the answer to this. But that answer doesn't come directly. It comes in 5 parts, each of which hides a truth that remains just as relevant today. The first question, is it a crime or a skill to make money out of someone's hardship? The second question, there are 2 kinds of people in the world, those who create music and those who put a meter on it. How could Morgan sit above geniuses like Edison and Tesla without creating a single thing? The third question, is it to fight the competition or to buy the competition? The fourth question, becoming rich is one thing. Becoming important is another. What does it mean the day your enemy, who has vowed to destroy you, calls you at night? And the fifth question, all of this has a price. And what is that price? You will learn that today. After watching this video, you'll decide for yourself whether to play this game. But without understanding it, you'll always be a pawn in it. So let's begin music. Before understanding this man and his terrifying game, learn the 3 things that made him who he is, because only then will you truly enjoy the game. We often see in movies or hear in motivational videos that a certain man rose from the streets to a palace. Nothing like that happened with J.P. Morgan. He was born in a palace. Now you might say, he was the son of a rich man. He was destined to rule. But wait. Back then, the Vanderbilt family had a son named Reginald Vanderbilt. He possessed countless wealth. Cornelius Vanderbilt had spent his entire life building an empire. But his grandson, Reginald, squandered it all on gambling and alcohol. He died at the age of 45, deeply in debt. Today, no one knows his name. So the question is, what did Morgan have that other sons of wealthy fathers didn't? The answer was in his blood. He carried the DNA of 2 very different, dangerous individuals. His grandfather's name was John Pierpont. He was a pastor, but no ordinary pastor. He was a provocative and stern man whose speech in church would send shivers down the spine of the crowd. He knew how to manipulate people's minds with his words. As a young child, Morgan watched as his grandfather spoke to a crowded gathering, and one thought stuck in his mind: true power doesn't lie in a cannon. True power lies in a man who can subdue an opponent without a weapon. Here, Morgan demonstrated the power of his voice and the art of intimidating by looking into their eyes that he had learned from his grandfather. John Pierre Poynton Morgan, or J.P. Morgan, was named after this grandfather. And on the other hand, was his father, Junior Spencer Morgan. A completely opposite kind of person. Cool-headed, completely calculated. He considered emotions a weakness. He was a prominent London banker. His philosophy was one of slowness, thoughtfulness, and never hasty decisions. Now, imagine the passion, enthusiasm, and power of his tongue on one side, and the shrewd, cool mind of his father on the other. When these two things came together in one child, the chemical imbalance that ensued was very dangerous for the world. Morgan was very sick from childhood. He suffered from fevers, migraines, and seizures. But his biggest problem was his nose. He suffered from rosacea and rhinophyma. These conditions caused the cells in his nose to grow so much that it gradually became red, swollen, and disfigured. As a child, Morgan remained confined indoors, unlike other children who played outside. The child who couldn't go outside went inside, into his mind, into books, into numbers. The other children's playground was Morgan's financial statement. Once in school, the teacher asked the children to write an essay on their favorite hero. The other good children in the class wrote about George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, the leaders who built the country, but this one wrote about Napoleon. His family counseled him on Napoleon. They said, "Son, he wasn't a good man. He was a dictator. He couldn't be a role model." But that 15-year-old Morgan had immense clarity in his mind. He said, Napoleon united the scattered pieces of the world. He ruled. He proved that a man's willpower can bring the world to its knees. A child who considers Napoleon his guru at 15 will certainly not grow up to become Gandhiji. Music, that was a certainty. And then his father made a decision that completely transformed Morgan from within. At the age of 15, Morgan contracted rheumatic fever, a very serious illness. Morgan's father, Junius, thought he had to cure his son, or perhaps toughen him up, because his methods were unusual. He sent that sick 15-year-old to an unknown island called the Azores in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, alone, with no friends, no siblings, no problem. Just close your eyes and imagine a whole year. Nowadays, if you turn off a 15-year-old's Wi-Fi or lock him in a room for a day, he falls into depression. The father thought he had strengthened his son. But the famous psychologist, Carl Jung, has a theory about the shadow. He says that when a person experiences severe trauma or loneliness, a shadow is born within him, a dark part hidden from the world, transforming fear and pain into strength. On that island, Morgan didn't learn how to live alone. He learned to trust no one in this world. Don't depend on anyone, because when you're weak, even your own people will leave you to die in the ocean. When that boy returned from the island music, his body had healed. But the man inside had turned to stone. He had become a man who no longer needed anyone, but instead wanted the whole world to be dependent on him. Now you've seen the roots of that man. You understand the furnace in which J.P. Morgan's mind was forged. So now let's delve into that man's true game. The first question is making money out of someone's hardship. Making money when the world is crying. At that time, the common man sits at home, closes the door, and becomes afraid. Morgan did something else at the age of 24. When Morgan was 24, the American Civil War broke out. People from the North and South were slitting each other's throats. The country was littered with corpses. The government issued a law mandating that every young man must enlist in the army and fight. But Morgan had money. There was a special rule in those days. If you had money, music you could send someone else in your place for $300. The poor went to fight. The rich paid $300 and stayed home. He used to joke that he was my second Morgan, fighting in the war. But did Morgan stay away from war? Absolutely not. He went to war, just in a different way. This story is known in history as the Hall Carbine Affair. The government had 5,000 old and worn-out rifles, worth scrap. The army had discarded them because they were old and dangerous. Some of the guns were so dangerous that they could blow off the fingers of the shooter. Morgan, along with a lawyer music, somehow bought those 5,000 guns from the government for just $3.50 each. He had a few dents painted over and the bullet barrels widened. In other words, the barrels of these rifles were slightly improved. They were bored out and converted to .58 caliber. The cost of the contraband gun was just 75 cents, and Morgan waited. A few weeks later, when the Northern Army lost a major battle and needed guns overnight, Morgan sold those same 5,000 guns back to the government. For how much? 2 per gun. A straight 600 profit. The soldiers who fired those guns suffered blown-off hands. Thumbs were blown off because the guns were defective. Later, when an investigation was conducted, a congressional committee declared this man worse than a traitor. But Morgan calmly replied, "I have not violated any law. He didn't break it," and that was the truth. What's a betrayal for the common man is supply and demand for the rich. Here's the answer to the first question. When the common man sees trouble, he panics and backs away. But a different kind of mind, in the same predicament, asks, what will demand increase now? Who has become weak? What supply will decrease? Look at the pattern. Morgan wasn't bad. He was compartmentalized. Emotions are one thing, business is another. And that's the basic premise of the game of those who want to acquire everything without creating anything. Now you wonder if this stone-hearted man ever had any feelings? Was he really just a machine? The answer is yes, he did have feelings. Once. Just once. Around that time, a girl came into Morgan's life, Aemilius Turgis, whom he affectionately called Mimi. A girl from a banking family, and for the first time, Morgan saw in a human being what he hadn't found in the balance sheet. A 3-year friendship, then love, a Tiffany diamond ring, and wedding preparations. But a few months before the wedding, Mimi fell ill. She developed a terrible cough. Doctors examined her and discovered she had tuberculosis. Today, TB is treatable. But in the 1860s, TB meant immediate death. Your lungs would bleed. Doctors forbade marriage, family members dissuaded, but Morgan was adamant. He declared, "I will marry her." On the wedding day in October 1861, Mimi was so weak she couldn't even stand. The man who would make governments dance to his will carried his bride down the stairs in his arms that day. He helped her stand with the help of chairs so the wedding rituals could be completed. Morgan spent money lavishly. He called the world's best doctors. He took Mimi abroad so that the warm air could heal her. But death doesn't take bribes from any banker. In February 1862, just 4 months after their marriage, Mimi died in his arms. Morgan was 24 years old and a widower. Now, here's a crucial point. A normal boy might have been devastated by this shock, drowning in alcohol or becoming a devdas. Morgan returned to New York. He never shed a tear. He never showed his grief to anyone. Carl Jung's shadow theory states that emotions we don't express outwardly don't go away. They settle within us and begin to control us from within. Morgan's grief didn't surface. It festered within, turning into a terrifying ambition. After Mimi's departure, Morgan locked himself in a room. For 2 years, he spent there studying accounting, finance, and balance sheets. The hunger that awakened in Morgan after Mimi wasn't just a hunger for money. It was the hunger of a man who knew he couldn't control death, but perhaps he could control everything else. Wealth, power, industry, everything. Because power was the only thing that could save him from the loneliness of that Azores island. A few months later, he married a second time, to a woman named Fanny. He had waited 3 years for Mimi. He married Fanny within a few months. No romance, no feelings. Just a practical decision. The ounce of love had been buried with Mimi. Morgan had now completely turned to stone. And this stone-hearted man was now ready to make the world dance to his terms. The second question: Edison created electricity, Tesla created current. Both were geniuses. Both possessed skills Morgan lacked. So how did he rise above them? The answer lies in a line Morgan asked Tesla, which changed the course of Tesla's entire life. This was the era known as America's Gilded Age. The country was being built. Money was everywhere. Everyone wanted to be rich. Andrew Carnegie had become the king of steel. John D. Rockefeller was the king of oil. Everyone wanted to enter the railways. The result was that 4 companies were operating trains on a single route. Simply put, the American railway business, the track-laying business, was a dogfight. Consider this with a local example. Imagine 10 dhabas have opened on a highway. In an attempt to attract customers, The first dabba owner is selling a 50 rupee plate for 40. The second is selling it for 30. The third is selling it for 20. What is the result? The customers are benefiting, but the dabba owners are all suffering losses. No one is making a profit. The same thing was happening with the railways. For companies were operating trains on a single route, and in their attempt to undercut each other, all were incurring losses, all were in debt, all were on the verge of collapse. Now a man arrives, wearing a suit and smoking a cigar. He called 10 dabba owners and said, "All of you join me in this project. I'll invest money. All of you join forces. The price of a plate is fixed at 60 Indian rupees, and we will sell food exclusively on this entire highway. Anyone who refuses will be bought out and shut down." This was Morgan's game, and it earned a name in those days, Morganization. Morgan hated competition. He used to say, "Competition is for fools. It leads to ruin. The real money is in control, in order." Morgan began buying up loss-making railway companies one by one. He would offer them money, but only on one condition: "I will have a seat on your board of directors, and whatever I say will be done." He merged all the small and failing companies. He kicked out their incompetent owners and, by uniting them, created a monopoly. Now, there was no competition.